Screen.
How did you recover from Waco, Travis? How was
Yeah.
it?
Funny thing, I didn't go to Waco. I went to another event in Texas that was in the town of Frisco. And this one was a little bit more melted. It involved a man who goes by the name Baby Trump.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, he claimed. And also, I saw 107, who many people claim to be the living JFK Jr. I saw a 12-year-old child, on stage talk about how he hopes the rapture happens soon. And then I also saw a songs from the musical QAnon the musical. So it was a quite interesting trip. Yeah.
That's the thing, QAnon the musical.
Yeah. That's right. Apparently, there's already been one performance of it, but they're trying to make it go on tour. Um, and yeah, we're gonna play some songs from that event in our next episode. But yeah, it was interesting. This was really kind of like yeah the people I saw were really fringe. Actually, they're kind of affiliated with the Negative 48 cult, which is
Yeah.
based in Dallas. But yeah, yeah.
Because yeah,
So,
sorry, I was just going to say yeah, because there was a Trump rally in Waco for people that don't know, and Waco has a very very historically significant in the kind of militia adjacent movement. So it's pretty on the nose to have the rally there. But you were at Reckoning Fest.
yes, yeah. I went to Reckoning Fest, and this is an event that they've had four of these so far, and it involves a few people, including they previously have had My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell and
Mm.
um, one-time CBS news journalist turned absolute lunatic Lara Logan, and lots of other people kind of like on the fringe on the conspiratorial rights. But this is a very strange QAnon event in which they basically talk about how they really believe. For example, there are many people on stage at this event who claimed in all seriousness that Trump is still president and Joe Biden isn't, and they look for signs in the form of like change security measures from different places in Washington D.C. as evidence of sort of a secret military operation going on behind the scenes. It was really madness.
Do you think that do they subscribe to the Biden or the Trump is inside Biden, like in a kind of cloning situation, or is that a thing?
No. There are various theories. They claim, for example, that well, some people claim that, for example, like Biden actually is in the White House, but he's a puppet government, and it's really being controlled by Trump, and in some cases, along with JFK Jr., because a lot of people think that JFK Jr. is still alive. Um, Other people think that the Biden that we see is actually a performance, being taking place at a soundstage in Hollywood, and they claim that there's actually a replica Oval Office and replica White House that they're using to film all these fake scenes of Biden being in the White House. But yeah, it's really none of it's coherent, honestly.
Mm. I mean, to point out the bleeding obvious with this kind of stuff, I mean, from the kind of outside, this stuff is all pretty crazy and pretty obvious things to point out. But I mean, with these kinds of people, when they actually believe things like Biden's actually Trump in a suit, or JFK is actually, Trump is actually JFK in a suit or something. I mean, by their own logic, by their own theories that they're throwing out, wouldn't that make them massive Biden supporters? If Trump's actually just in charge and Biden's just the puppet, I mean, surely they'd be in support of this current administration, right?
That is a good point. That's an argument I have to say I have never personally brought up with them. It's like, well, why? It's like that's a good point. It's like, well, if you really believe that Biden is some sort of puppet and he's under Trump's control, then everything he's doing is actually good and is being done by Trump and should be in line with what all your heroes are doing. but for some reason that they don't quite they're not consistent on that point. They're very vicious towards Biden. So I couldn't tell you how that makes any sense.
When you go to these events, I think you've been to quite a few over the years. What are your interactions like with these people? What kind of questions do you ask? Are they pleasant? Do they know who you are? And what do you try to get out of them when you actually talk to them and interact with them?
Yeah. So I mean, like the kinds of questions that I ask are usually pretty straightforward. Why are you here? What brought you here? How'd you hear about the event? That usually gets them talking enough to really understand their beliefs and what motivates them. I have been to. I was talking about this with Julian, my co-host on QAnon Anonymous, and we were talking about it's like we probably have been to more QAnon events than anyone on Earth, more so even than the kinds of people who go to these events, because like no QAnon follower, even if they are really into QAnon, is literally flying across the country to multiple states to attend QAnon events. I've attended multiple events in California. I attended actually in Hollywood. There was a Save the Children march in which people, held up signs about Pizzagate, adrenochrome, and they demanded that the Hollywood sickos let the children go. And lots of people believe that, for example, that there is actually a secret underground base underneath the Getty Museum here in Los Angeles. And I've been to the very first QAnon event in Washington, D.C. back in 2019, which took place right across from the Washington Monument, which I saw, some people like, for example, Jordan Sather, who is one time a pretty popular QAnon influencer,
And he
Gene
busted
Ho.
you. And he busted you.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, he seemed to like recognize this is before as like he knew of me before. I don't think he had like seen my face before, but like my co-host Julian asked him what he thought of Travis View, and then he didn't react very well. But I've been to QAnon events also in Florida. There I went to one in Tampa, Florida, that was held by this organization called the Red Pill Roadshow, which kind of went defunct, honestly. And I went to this recent one in Texas. But I do sometimes get recognized. For example, I went to an event in Arizona called QCon, and this one was, I think, probably the biggest ones because it involved Jim Watkins, owner of 8chan and 8kun or QAnon Posts. And I also saw the QAnon Shaman actually was there at the Arizona event. This is all the way back in it was like October of 2020, so it was before the January 6th insurrection. And some of the organizers actually did know who I was. I got introduced for a couple of people introduced themselves to me. For example, in the Matrix, his real name is Jeffrey Pedersen. He's kind of a popular QAnon podcaster, and he recognized me and shook my hand and chatted with me and got a selfie with me. So so he recognized me, and I was also recognized by JT Wild. He's a QAnon musician who puts out songs with titles like Digital Soldier. He seemed to know who I was too. So I do get recognized sometimes. I haven't, I think their reaction towards me is really more irritation than hostility, I have to say. One thing that I do like about I appreciate about QAnon followers is that I think I've mentioned this before on podcasts is that the QAnon has led to lots of horrible destruction and violence, that sort of stuff. I think your average rank and file QAnon followers aren't really interested in personally doing violence to someone, even like myself, if they happen to see me at an event. But so that was my experience. Meeting people. I try to not raise my profile too much. For example, at this recent Texas event, no one recognized me, fortunately. I guess I wasn't really on the radar of that particular sect of QAnon.
I was going to say, JT Wild, he's not too bad. The
Yeah,
guy can sing.
That I thought the same thing. It's like, you know what, man, he is actually a pretty talented vocalist and guitar player. I've seen him perform live a couple times. Yeah, and he is really good. I was like, I imagine that even without the QAnon angle, he'd be, you know, a pretty successful, like at least touring musician or something, or like, you know, a session musician. But he always, there's actually, it reminds me of, there's another case of a musician named Flat Earth Man. And he produces songs with titles like "Space is Fake" and "Do You Really Believe We Went to the Moon?" Which, you know, it's just like it sounds. And
Very
he
literal.
is decent. Yeah, right. And he's a decent musician. But I think that, you know, it's what, whereas, you know, if you are a decent musician in this, you know, very competitive industry, you can only at best do okay for yourself. But if you are, you know, a pretty talented musician and you sort of cater to these kinds of fringe communities, then man, there you can create the best kind of like niche music than that they ever heard. And that's why I think like JT Weil and Flat Earth Man are kind of like working the same angle in that sense.
You kind of need that. Like, you know, they need entertainment too. But I was wanted to say about within the Matrix, which I find kind of interesting, is that he's managed to really be quite consistent and like remain, you know, to kind of keep his thing going. And like he had a photo taken with Trump at Mar-a-Lago like last week after the, you know, supposed indictment was announced, which I thought was kind of interesting. Which brings us to what a day. The storm has come, huh? With this.
Yeah.
Big day.
Shocking.
Trump indicted and QAnon shaman early release. All in
Yes,
one
same
day.
day.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, it's shocking stuff. I mean, it's like QAnon shaman Jacob Chansley. Um, I was like, I obviously I like said this on Twitter, but I really hope he has like learned from his experiences and tries to find a better use of his energies. But you know, I feel like there's a pretty strong likelihood that the right like the right wing media is going to take up his cause and make him a celebrity and turn him into a martyr, and then he'll get sucked into that environment, and maybe they'll come like, I don't know, book deals and interview offers that come his way, and he'll get, you know, sucked into the same kind of weird conspiracist ecosystem that led him to travel to Washington D.C. on January 6th in the first place. So yeah, I just hope that yeah, he does better for himself. And for yeah, Trump is like, I really thought that they would get him over the classified document stuff. How he had allegedly, you know, took classified documents and kept them at Mar-a-Lago without authorization. People are always talking about how that was a much more serious offense than anything is did. But then this weird Stormy Daniels story came roaring back. I had almost forgotten about it, but then it became relevant again. It's this weird campaign finance thing. But you know, there's still so much that we don't know as of this recording. We haven't seen the sealed indictment. Those are the other great thing. This is a real sealed indictment for Trump, you know, because you know, QAnon followers, they always fantasized. They always try to explain, well, the reason why like Hillary Clinton and Obama and James Comey and all the people that we hate aren't being swept up in mass arrests is because there are sealed indictments. There's, you know, there are all these secret indictments going on behind the scenes, and then they will all be revealed at once, and then basically take all these evil Democrats off the political playing board. Of course, that didn't happen. But yeah, we got a real sealed indictments for Trump, and it's gonna be weird, man. I'm told that he's gonna turn himself in on Tuesday. We might get a mugshot of Trump. It's gonna be crazy.
I've heard that he's actually quite into it. I mean, I don't know how much I really kind of go with the Maggie Haberman reporting from the New York Times on Trump personally, but she claims that he's into it. Like he wants to, you know, get handcuffed, do the perp walk, and make it into a big kind of media event, which is something he's quite good at doing. I mean, which should be fun to watch. But, you know, it is weird that it came 7 years after the fact. And, Fox News is arguing that, it's like the statute of limitations is out. So they changed it to a misdemeanor rather than a felony or whatever. And yeah, I kind of thought the document thing would be the one to get him. And also the Georgia case. Because, I've listened to that phone call.
They could still come, though, couldn't they? They could still come down the track.
Yeah, I just think it takes time because grand juries, they take time, and he's, paying heaps of money to stall them, and like, I don't know. It'd be pretty funny if he had like an ankle brace. I don't think he's going to go to jail, but if he had an ankle bracelet and he's like trying to campaign for, from Mar-a-Lago,
buzzing while he's doing his speeches and stuff. That'd be great.
Yeah, one thing I remember from reporting on Trump during his presidency is that he would sometimes like to like tweet something outrageous and then like watch TV coverage of like, all the networks talking about him all day. That's the same thing that's going on right now. He's at Mar-a-Lago and he's glad to be the center of attention again, because one thing he certainly is masterful at is sort of like, cultivating and directing media attention and sort of creating a big circus around himself.
He's brilliant at it.
Yeah, totally. How is some of these QAnon influencers and talking heads, some of the people that we've kind of mentioned earlier, or I don't know, just the general universe, how are they reacting to the Trump indictment? It's probably a pretty predictable answer, that melting down, but have you seen any interesting takes or anything to keep note of?
Well, yeah. They always, of course, it's all fine. It's all part of the plan. At least the QAnon sort of influencers that I follow, because they often make reference to these old Q drops that talk about a boomerang, and they believe that this basically means is that they think they're going to get Trump, but they're going to fall into a trap, or even this sets a sort of a precedent. If you can charge Trump with a crime, then surely that means that sets the precedent to charging Obama with the many crimes that they believe Obama had committed. So a lot of them are still very optimistic and trusting the plan. I have to say, or some people think that this is a Rubicon moment, but it's still going to turn out good, because there's going to be, maybe this is going to start of the military takeover. There's going to be some sort of military coup that takes Trump back into power. Yeah, so I'm going to be interested to see what happens, after Trump is, turns himself in allegedly, and then the indictment is unsealed, because we'll have more details of exactly how much trouble he might be in. Because I think the QAnon community's reaction after that will be very interesting.
I think there was 34 counts. Well, that's what I saw.
Yeah, 34 counts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, Lindsey Graham was on Hannity, I think, or Ingram, with basically tears in his eyes, like, how are they going to do it? And he's like, well, if you cut 34 a piece of shit into 34 parts, and it's still a piece of shit. And it's like, whatever, man. It's like tears in his eyes, just kind of losing it. But yeah, I saw baby Trump was just confused. Like he made a post and he's just like, what? Like, I don't, how. So it'll be interesting to see how they like eventually kind of deal with it. But yeah, I'm thinking the Georgia thing might be also a pretty big deal. But I've kind of become quite skeptical and cynical about, that kind of thing. And I don't want to be one of those guys like, jail all your enemies, because it's the same kind of shit QAnon does. But, it's fun to watch.
Mm. Do you think there'll be any kind of, big upsurgence, like this will really empower the kind of QAnon base, or just the general conspiracy theory, deep state kind of narrative around that, and potentially another big January 6th type event or anything like that? Do you see anything bubbling, or has it kind of just simmered down and lost its power a bit?
Well, it really depends on what Trump does. I think that, one of the things that made January 6th happen at all was the fact that that Trump specifically told his followers, his most devoted followers, to come to DC on January 6th. There was going to be a wild protest. And then he fed them this false narrative about how Michael Pence, Vice President Pence, is able to basically reject the electoral votes from states that he deems fraudulent and send it back to the states, and that there's some thing that Pence can do in order to reverse the results of the election. And so those two things, the fact that he, Trump physically summoned his most devoted followers to a particular place and then fed them this false narrative. That's really what led to January 6th. I mean, I don't think January 6th would happen without those two kind of things. So I think that I think would really I don't think about QAnon followers is that the majority of them are real keyboard warriors. They'll tweet and they'll post and they'll be on Gab or whatever, and they'll talk about how they're exposing the bad guys and red pilling the normies or whatever, but they aren't really interested in putting themselves in harm's way usually. But if Trump asks people to be at a certain time and place, that's going to change the dynamic because he still has the grip of a cult leader over his most devoted followers.
I noticed that after he heard of the indictment coming down or whatever, like he did make those posts on Truth Social, about protest. Now's the time, take the country back, and etc. And there was like 20 people at Trump Tower, and then there's 1,000 journalists.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it. I mean, I think would change the dynamics that it needs to be, instead of a vague sort of like protest command, instead of show up this time is sometime in the near future, maybe a day that people have off at this particular place. When it gets to be really specific, then I think it might be more concerning.
And I also kind of wonder because he didn't pardon any of the people from January 6th, like even though he did, I believe he still had time to do that. Like he pardoned, Roger Stone and Mike Flynn and whoever, and didn't really protect them. So maybe there's a kind of a fear that if they do those things, that they will just get, arrested and put in jail and whatever. So that might,
but the interesting thing is that for Trump's most devoted followers, they still think that January 6th was a sort of trap or a tragic event, or everyone who got arrested was done so unjustly, and none of this is like Trump's fault, and they don't really blame Trump for like you said for not preemptively pardoning people before they were charged for these crimes. So I mean, I don't think that would be a factor, but like I said, there's going to be lots of time to see how these indictments play out. So we'll see.
I feel really bad for Ray Epps. Do you remember?
Yeah,
poor guy, because he's big Trump supporter. Yeah, and he's like, we're going into the Capitol, and he got filmed, and now MAGA turned on him and said he's an FBI agent. He had to relocate and get security or whatever because they all want to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. I can't feel too bad for him because he did try to encourage people to go inside the Capitol, not because he's sort of a FBI agent provocateur or anything, but just because he was an overly aggressive dumbass. But you're right. He did as a consequence of his encouraging people to take those kinds of actions. He's been called a Fed or a plant or some sort of thing. It's one of those things where it's like there's a it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility that someone placed in an extremist group is a federal informant. At least there are federal informants placed for the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. So we recently learned that the alt-right troll Microchip has been acting as a federal informant since 2018. So it's one of those things that where it's like, well, you can't really dismiss these kinds of accusations out of hand, but there's just no evidence whatsoever that this is the case in Ray Epps' case.
And Enrico Tarrio obviously was also head of the Proud Boys, was also was ratted to the feds as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. It happens a lot, and it's always strange. Like I always get what I always get the sort of like the premise, the law enforcement premise of allowing and these extremists to like operate even while you have sort of an informant inside of their group, because I guess the idea is that you want to gather as much evidence as you can and see how you can sort of like roll up the organization and see if you can, you know, get evidence that implicates sort of people higher up in the organization. But when you're like, you know, but when someone's like a federal informant for years and years, and like there aren't any sort of major arrests, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Now you're just sort of like basically like friends with these people in these extremist organizations, more or less. But we'll see if there's see if these federal informants you know, actually, you know, wind up doing good. I know in Microchip's case, the reason why we know that he's a federal informant is because he recently testified in the case of, was it Mackey, this sort of a guy who was charged with posting these memes that encouraged Hillary Clinton voters to vote via phone, which of course didn't work. So basically disenfranchising Hillary Clinton voters. And yeah, he was actually found guilty just today in a jury.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Jacob Wall and whatever his mate's name, what they were doing kind of around 2020 as well. But like with these characters like Microchip, because I didn't really know much about this dude. Like I've heard him kind of mentioned by, you know, certain Blue Anon influencer types, and I was kind of wondering what you think about those kind of characters, like the Defangos and the like Thomas Schoenbergers and all these people after the fact of the Q drops, and you know the golden era of QAnon. Like, what do you kind of think about these people that have come forward after the fact and you know, tried to be kind of influencers in the field later on? Like, what do you reckon?
Yeah. You know, there are a lot of smarter reporters than me who sort of like try to make sense of the claims of a lot of these LARPers that have sort of like who have been active in the course of the last several years, and what they may or may not have done. Microchip, for example, famously tried to take credit for authoring the very first Q drops, and he did this through a report on One American News, which was done by Jack Posobiec. And his evidence were these sort of these clearly doctored and fake Discord chats, and then that the other issue is that OAN report has actually since been deleted from their website without explanation. So it's just it's one of those things. It's one of those things where like it's like, well, this guy, this Microchip, he's clearly a bullshitter. He's open about how he's fine with spreading disinformation. He's not really adherent to the truth. So in one sense, that makes him perfectly qualified to be involved in early QAnon, because this does involve a lot of nonsense and disinformation and sort of like, you know, riling people up in order to support Trump, but at the same time that calls into question his initial claims. And yeah, like no news outlet has picked up the claim that Microchip was directly involved in the first Q drops, just because no one was able to verify this according to typical journalistic standards. Now, you can't rule it out, you know, but it's one of those things where it's just no one has been able to verify that. I mean, there's certain things that like Microchip could have done in order to aid the verification. For example, he could have invited a journalist into the Discord chat where supposedly Q was created. That would allow people to not have to rely upon these screenshots or videos of the supposed Discord chat. It could be verified independently. Of course, he didn't do that, and I suspect it's because this whole story was bullshit.
I'm glad you brought up like characters like Defango and Schoenberger and Thomas Schoenberger. So, you know, I've recently, I kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole myself on like in Q Into the Storm, they kind of outline a bit of this this online alternative reality game called Cicada 3301. I just recently went back and listened to your guys' episode on that. And it's absolutely fascinating, this like all these really intricate clues that are laid out. But the reason bringing that up is I kind of recently unironically went down the rabbit hole of falling just very temporarily, kind of almost entertaining some of these ideas expressed through like Blue Anon, thinking that they might be getting a bit conspiratorial, kind of in the other direction of QAnon. I'm wondering. I had no idea about this phenomenon of Blue Anon. I brought it up to Owen. Owen kind of filled me in, but I was wondering whether you could give us a bit of an overview of what Blue Anon is, because I wouldn't be surprised if the audience has no idea.
Sure. Yeah. Blue Anon is a name given to, I guess, a more liberal version of conspiracist thinking that in many ways resembles QAnon. I'll be clear. I want to draw like a false equivalence. I don't think that what they often call Blue Anon is like as pervasive or nearly as dangerous as QAnon, but it is sort of an interesting kind of conspiracist thinking. I also kind of hate the term Blue Anon just because of the way it's been kind of like hijacked by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who uses the term sometimes to basically, accuse anyone to the left of her of, but yeah, generally when I say Blue Anon, we usually refer to this phenomenon that actually emerged during the Mueller investigation, and there are lots of influencers like Louise Mensch and people in her sort of orbit who were assuring people that it was a certainty that Mueller was going to indict Trump for colluding with the Russians, and that he was a criminal, and that he would obviously be impeached and jailed for all of the horrible treason that he committed. And this resembles QAnon a little bit because there's this element of prophecy, this feeling that I have inside esoteric knowledge about what's really going to happen. And there's also this element of like all the bad guys you hate are going to be jailed. They're just going to be removed from the political chessboard, so we don't have to worry about them again. And then everyone will see how evil the bad guys are. So it really emerged since then, but it's really it's just continued since then. There are people who believe, for example, that the 2016 election was stolen as part of some sort of plot between the Russians and Trump and other forces, and that particular election was stolen from Hillary, and that these kinds of things. So yeah, it's just sort of like it's the same kind of interesting kind of wish casting, the belief that I just have to basically post and tweet and post on social media about how evil these bad guys are, and then they'll be exposed, and then after they're exposed, they'll all go to jail, and then all of a sudden fascism will no longer be a threat in the world, which it just doesn't work that way. I don't think you can. I think social media is obviously very powerful and influential, but there are limits to it. I don't think you can necessarily post all your ways out of your political problems.
So where my conspiratorial kind of mind kind of came in was I went back and I was looking at re-looking over the MK Ultra phenomenon and how so much of that, is legit. It really happened. But these horrendous kind of experiments on people, and from there, trying to create mind control and stuff. And I guess contextualizing that back into QAnon, the thought process of maybe QAnon is actually this complex kind of psyop aimed to divide people against each other. And then when you kind of
destroy democracy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a government of, the idea is it's, they claim that Q is a government operative, but the other conspiracy side of things would be, no, this is a government operation in another way, more like a giant mass delusion, MK Ultra mind control thing to plot people against each other. So Q is actually, in that narrative, still not a real figure, but it's a bigger web, which kind of ties into things like, you look at the Cicada 3301 online alternative reality game, where it is just all these breadcrumbs and getting people to all over the world to kind of drop their lives and dedicate an unhealthy amount of time to trying to crack this code, try to crack this puzzle, and literally even travel around the world for this bizarre online game for geniuses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like you're really touching on like one of the things that made QAnon successful was the fact that is a gamified experience, somewhat. The idea that it's really extraordinary. It's participatory, and that's
Mm.
so much. It's so different than a lot of the other kind of conspiracy theories, and it is interesting when you look at the previous kind of like think previous sort of like insider anons that resembled QAnon. Thinking like FBI anon, the Mega anon, and sometimes these entities would engage in what they call Q&As, which like the fans of these people who these other sort of anons on 4chan who claim to be government insiders with secret knowledge, they would ask questions and then the FBI anon or Mega anon would answer them back. QAnon kind of flipped that head because QAnon ask the questions and then they asked it was supposedly providing ways of investigating or things to Google search that sort of drew people in and really got them activated. But
And
the
I think
the yeah.
I was just going to say, sorry, Travis. Like the thing for me is that if Occam's razor applies to pretty much everything for me, and the simplest kind of thing is, as a lot of people that have studied this, is it's just kind of shit posting that got really out of hand. Like you had all the different anons as in the beginning, like kind of trying it out on 4chan and what like an 8chan, and it just didn't take off. But Q did, like
Yeah.
it's just a lot simpler to me than I think any of those kind of conspiratorial viewpoints make it out to be.
But when you've got something like Cicada 3301, and I think this man Thomas Schoenberger is meant to be behind that. He's a quite a weird composer online, and he seems to actually have pulled off at a much smaller scale. The target audience was far more narrow. When you do see things like that, you can kind of understand how a much dumber version could be successful. A much more just like chuck salt and pepper, salt and sugar in the mix, just like make it much more accessible, much more broad, much dumber. Just like the junk food version of something like that could take off. I mean, do any of those kind of theories? I mean, have any of you guys entertained any of those theories over at QAnon Anonymous, or is it pretty transparently just nonsense?
I would not say it's transparently nonsense. What I would say is that that world of LARPers, I mean, there are, like I said, there are lots of journalists who have looked into it, who I've talked to, who've really attempted to verify the claims that there is a specific group of people who conspired to create QAnon, and they just haven't been able to really get there. Like you said, there's a episode. I mean, there's an episode of Q Into the Storm that talks about the cicada connection and Thomas Schoenberger. That's episode 5. So they do
Great episode.
talk about that. Yeah, yeah, is very fascinating. But man, there's really difficult to find any evidence beyond sort of an early amplification role. There's a case in the case, for example, Tracy Diaz, one of the very first what they called QTubers who promoted QAnon, all the way back in like November of 2017 when it was just like a week old. She previously was into Cicada. So there may be a connection in that, if you are someone who is, if Cicada people are very much into, internet mysterious, so esoteric puzzles, and you provide the same kind of thing. It it is really difficult to kind of separate the degree to which something is part of a sophisticated strategy and something is part of like what how much of it is just plain old cult like grifting and how much of it is shit posting. And I have to feel like there's some combination of all those three elements that sort of made QAnon happen. But how much of each is kind of difficult to discern because it's all anonymous. And this is, I mean, this is a problem we have with, Bitcoin, for example. It's like no one knows exactly the person who came up with the blockchain technology that made Bitcoin. There, because they were anonymous. There's some theories about who Satoshi Nakamoto really is, but no one's quite sure. Is for us. I mean, there's some evidence that it feels like it really is. At least the early days, it was a shit poster who was sort of just taking a lot of themes that were on the pull board on 4chan and just integrating them into Q rather than any part of like sophisticated operation. And one of the lines of evidence was the Mueller white hat theory. And this was something that was promoted in the early days of Q, which claimed that, oh, Robert Mueller met with Trump right before he was elected or went to office, and then he has a military background, and a lot of people. He was Q was hinting at this idea that actually Robert Mueller was investigating Hillary, and actually Robert Mueller was a good guy. He was a white hat, and he was going to arrest all of Trump's enemies. And if you are trying to run an operation that is supportive of the Trump administration, and you want get people to believe but all of Trump's enemies are good and all of Trump's opponents are evil, then why on earth would you encourage people to think that Robert Mueller, a guy who's investigating Trump, who is indicting all of his friends, is a good guy? It doesn't really make any sense. But if you look at earlier posts and poll, the white hat theory was constantly repeated. There were lots of people who were saying, "Hey, is Robert Mueller our guy?" on poll. The Mueller white hat theory was sort of like very popular on 4chan before Q came along, which is evidence that whoever helped make those early Q drops was just sort of integrated into the 4chan culture, and they really weren't that interested in sort of promoting a narrative that was supportive of the Trump administration necessarily. Now, that's just one strain of evidence, but I thought it was very interesting because it's just the idea that you would portray Robert Mueller as a good guy is totally inconsistent with any kind of campaign that would be supportive of Trump. Of course, no one who is likes Trump would try to portray Robert Mueller as a hero. But if you were a 4chan shit poster, you would.
And it's bad press, like he, for 2 years or whatever it was, 2.5 years that the investigation was going on. It's just like bad press. It's like all over all the media and all that kind of stuff. And then I guess maybe some vindication that they felt at the end of it was that it kind of went out with a little bit of a fizzle. Like Mueller was kind of not very good in those kind of congressional hearings or whatever. Bill Barr kind of came out ahead of it. And so it didn't really do anything. So maybe they felt kind of vindicated in some ways.
Yeah, but that was after the investigation was completed. I mean, like the first Q drops were in 2017, like just as they were ramping up. In fact, the very first Q drop I remember was would happen to be posted the day after the first indictments related to or at least the indictments of his campaign manager, of Trump's campaign manager. So I always thought that was interesting timing. That was like one way I was trying to one line of sort of like investigation and try and tie Q to Trump directly, but certainly no one has made that accusation stick to in a way that's sort of like solid enough and convincing enough for any serious outlet to stake their reputation on.
And also just after the time that he let go of Mike Flynn. Right. Like it was just around.
Well, no. Actually, it was like, I have to look this one up because I think that was actually several months before.
Okay.
With bringing up Mike.
Oh yeah, Michael Flynn. Yeah, so yeah, Michael Flynn resigned in February of 2017, and the first Q drops appeared in November of 2017.
Oh, okay.
Bringing up Mike Flynn. So another thing that was kind of getting me thinking around this weird train of thought of whether QAnon was a psyop kind of thing was you mentioned also that episode 5 of Q Into the Storm, which I've had to go back and watch multiple times because it's so dense. But I mean, one of the figures that Cullen Hoback brings up is this retired army general called Paul Vallely, which was he kind of illustrated, he's basically the author of the book on psyops, and then this guy's coming out and promoting QAnon constantly. Then you've also got people like Mike Flynn, who's disgraced army general, is he?
He's a 4-star general,
yeah,
I think, but he was the DIA
right.
under Obama, and Obama let him go because he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things he said to Trump in the Oval Office was, "Don't hire Mike Flynn."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, definitely hiring Flynn."
Him. But so you've got like Paul Vallely promoting it, who wrote the book on psyop. You've got Mike Flynn, piece of shit, whatever, but he's also promoting it. When you get these high profile ex-army generals and stuff kind of promoting this stuff, part of me is almost, you remember the Disclosure Project, when all these ex-army people are coming out speaking in favor of UFOs, and that all of a sudden gave it so much more cred, the UFO phenomenon. Like, it's no longer just people in the streets saying they saw things in the sky. These are ex-military people, and it gives cred. So I mean, what do you think are the motives of these high-ranking people who have had long, good careers, an incredible resume behind them, that are coming out and toting QAnon stuff? What do you think the motive is behind those people?
Good question. I think that there's a pretty strong correlation between working in military intelligence or intelligence generally and conspiracist thinking. Just because trying to make sense. I mean, military intelligence obviously involves essentially, gathering information into a particular place and then trying to make sense of it. And that can, when it's done properly, it can sort of resemble conspiracist thinking. But you're right. I mean, there've been lots of people who are, former government officials who have been promoted to. Another one I always thought was interesting was Michael Shore, and this is a guy who was a former CIA operative, and he actually was on the team that was like searching for Bin Laden. So he was, but he wound up promoting QAnon. Like you mentioned, like Paul Vallely. You say that he wrote the book on psyop. So what he actually wrote, he co-authored. This is interesting. A brief 7-page 1980 paper called "From Psyop to Mind War" with Michael Aquino, who is another sort of a psyop officer who served in the Vietnam War. And he is a fascinating character myself because he's a Satanist who broke away from the main Church of Satan, formed the Temple of Set. So he wound up, but this particular paper, the funny thing is that if you actually look how influential this particular paper is, it's not very. If you check the Google Scholar rank, it's been cited about 13 times over the course of 40 years, whereas like actually influential kind of papers that the military recommends and is influential, that can get hundreds of citations. I mean, I think it's a really more. I think the explanation for that is pretty mundane. It's really more. It's more of the fact that being sort of ex-military. I mean, being in military intelligence kind of like primes you for conspiracist thinking, and the fact that there's pretty strong strain of people who are former military who get radicalized. I mean, that's I think it can be as simple as that. I mean, like I said, man, there are people who are much smarter than me who've tried to investigate the QAnon's ties, how serious QAnon's ties are to these kinds of military officials, and they couldn't really make connections stronger than the fact that they liked the theories and promoted them and tried to validate them and try to benefit from them.
And I think also it demonstrates that even relatively smart people in the military are not immune to the red pill. Yeah, that is not.
Oh yeah. In fact, I would go a step further in that I would say that there's not really a there's is that being very intelligent or even being very well educated is not does not preclude does not stop you from becoming red pilled. I know that there is down in Australia there is a man who is a psychiatrist who wound up losing his license because he couldn't stop posting QAnon nonsense on his blog. So
Oh, really?
there's
Which dude
yeah
is that?
Haven't heard of this guy.
Who is that, Travis?
yeah. Let me double check his name.
I've probably seen him on Twitter or something. I
Yeah.
can't remember his name. That's funny.
Oh, here it is. Yes, Dr. Russell McGregor, Sydney psychiatrist, who had his ability to practice medicine revoked because in 2020 because he couldn't stop posting QAnon nonsense. So yeah, I mean, it's like what, yeah, being a smart person or being a well-educated person, even being an influential person, doesn't stop you from falling down the rabbit hole. It can provide it's satisfying for lots of ways, and it's like I've met people who are very very smart who were able to who are QAnon believers. It's just that QAnon provided them with a sense of meaning that they weren't able to get elsewhere.
Mm. Which made me I sent you a few clips because we wanted to talk a little bit about how QAnon has become a bit of an American export to some Western countries and even to Japan and South Korea and things
I
like
think
that.
Japan's got a big QAnon faction, doesn't it?
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely made its way into Australia. I've been to a few of those, covered a few of the freedom rallies, which are basically the anti-lockdown, anti-COVID kind of, broadly speaking, rallies that went down here. But a lot of Trump, not uncommon to see Trump flags, not uncommon to hear a lot of QAnon rhetoric being parroted in Australia, which is pretty funny. But yeah.
And so that clip that I sent Travis, of the guy with the very chafed up skin talking about the recent indictment and kind of alluding to almost the QAnon 10 days of darkness.
Guru. Shout out to Guru.
Anyway, so guys, I just want to put it out there. All right, we've been saying to you that it's getting close to shit. Okay, if Trump's indictment's correct, which I believe it is, we are about to see some shit. Okay, so get ready for it. I hope you're all prepared. We may lose this internet, guys. All right, we lose the internet. Well, then we got to work out what's going on. Okay, that doesn't mean we're going to lose phones and shit, but they are going to stop us from communicating on the net. But yeah, here we go, guys. I would say here we go. Okay, so get ready. If it goes down, don't panic.
Don't react. Activate.
Activate. Don't react. All right, we all get together in our little communities. All right, we start talking. All right, we know what we got to do.
Remember, Saturday, 9 o'clock at every library.
Yeah, every library, Saturday, 9 o'clock. Our meeting point, guys. All right.
What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, it's pretty it's pretty typical, I gotta say, of the reaction so far. Like I said, I saw a lot of QAnon followers reference that boomerang post. They believe that there's this is all evidence that actually Trump's enemies are about to be arrested. I mean, it's so frustrating because they're stuck in this narrative. They're stuck in this world in which their victory is assured in no matter of evidence. I mean, it's like even if he goes to prison, even if like Hillary Clinton lives a long life and dies in her bed surrounded by her loved ones, they're still going to believe that justice is coming.
Yeah, I think that Ricardo Bozzi as well is another one. I think he's had something to do with the military. He's an Australian freedom fighter who very much parrots. I don't know, that guy kind of scares me, to be honest. Like I said, I think he's worked in the military. I think he's also kind of tried to create his own political party, but
they absolutely lost it at the last. They got 13,000 votes out of like
right,
out of millions. So
but he kind of promotes ideas of, like, where we're watching a movie, this is all it's all actors and movies, and
many of your people may have heard that Donald Trump is about to be arrested. Now, first question is, why would this be telegraphed to the world? Well, there's a reason for that. They want people to watch. But why is Trump going to be arrested? Well, let me answer it this way. You've heard of predictive programming. You know that they've been showing us movies for years, and then when it actually happens for reality, there is no surprise. It's called predictive programming. Go back a little while. Do you remember when Mar-a-Lago, Trump's estate, was raided by the FBI? There was a shock and horror, and how dare they? You shouldn't do this. See, the first time anything happens, people get very agitated and very exercised over it. But the purpose of that, it was a setup too. You're watching a show. Please buy your soft drink and your popcorn and watch the show. The reason they did that to Trump, and it was a complete setup, was so they wanted to target Biden and then go through his stuff. So when they went through Biden's papers, there was no surprise and shock from the people, because psychologically they'd already watched Trump get raided, and so they say, well, if Trump got raided, then fair enough, let's go. If they want to investigate Biden and go through his papers, then no problem. The same thing is happening now. Now work it out for yourself, see if you can put the last piece into place. Trump's about to be arrested. Why? In order to begin the arrests of the others. Do you see how it works? Now, the guy actually being arrested won't be Trump, he's a double. That's part of the game too. But they have to arrest Trump so people, the normies out there, will go through the shock, horror, oh my God, that's terrible. And it's over, what, Stormy Daniels? Please. But they'll get that psychological shock, they'll get that out of the way, and then when Biden gets arrested, they'll go, oh yeah, that's fair enough, because they arrested Trump last month, so they're going to arrest Biden this month. And Obama. And Clinton. And Pelosi. And all of them. The arrests are starting. That's what they're trying to show you. That's why Trump is being arrested.
Yeah, it's that guy speaks with a lot of aggressive conviction, which for me kind of, my alarm bells ring a lot stronger with that guy. He just seems very much an extremist. I don't think he's done anything extreme other than just rhetoric and stuff, but I can see it in his eyes. It looks like he's got it in him.
Yeah. And I think he knows that, even getting those 13 to 15,000 votes or whatever, it's something, that's a lot of people that are voting for this dude. And he seems to kind of be very on message. And what did you think? There was another clip I sent you, Travis, of him, the Trump flyover. He's giving a speech, and he claims, he's like, look, everything's going fine. We are winning. We will win. Even though it seems kind of, like things aren't going great for us, we are definitely winning. And, there's proof that, there was a direct Trump flyover. I think he said a Trump flyover at their event.
Now, we are winning. For those who can know what to look for, we are winning. The signs are there. You've just got to see it. You're not going to get a news flash saying, oh, by the way, freedom fighters winning, corporate bastards losing. Not going to happen. Now, who saw the message, potential message, I'm not going to say it definitively was, who saw the message from Donald J. Trump as we were marching up the road? You didn't see it. Who saw a C-130J fly exactly along our path and then do an arcing left-hand corner over the Parliament? Now, a gentleman came up behind me and said, here's the track he's been following since he took off. And it came straight from his point of origin, up our path, around Parliament, went straight back home again. That plane had no purpose other than to let you know, and I've mentioned this before, we do what we do with our modest capabilities, and there are much more powerful international forces at play that are working with us to help us win. So, folks, be happy. We got this, and we are closer than you know.
Again, it just seems very, very kind of QAnon adjacent, and it just seems like it's just a kind of shittier Aussie version using all the same tropes and shit.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds actually a lot like something I heard at the recent Reckoning Fest event in Frisco, Texas, because I heard a woman speak who claimed that she heard over over a walkie-talkie near the U.S. Capitol building that someone said, please get ready for something roughly this, please get ready for Trump and Kennedy to leave the building. And the belief that either that Kennedy, either junior or senior, she didn't specify, was somehow in the Capitol building for some reason and with Trump for some reason. Is kind of like nonsense beliefs that the powerful people are around you and making moves secretly.
With this, it's kind of funny how a lot of these ideas have just made a massive, you can call it QAnon, but these kinds of ideas have been going around for ages. I used to be very unironically a conspiracy theorist when I was in my early 20s. I think me and Owen shared some similar kind of ideas around 2012, and I mean I'm still on board with the aliens and stuff, but yeah, it's it spreads its tendrils throughout, definitely throughout Australia, throughout so many countries. And it seems a lot more people are entertaining these ideas more than ever. Obviously COVID has had a lot to do with that. But yeah, I was also wondering, kind of in a culture war context as well, there seems to be a lot of failures from the left that seem to be allowing a lot of what may have just been rational people think, man, all this leftist stuff is getting so bullshit that I'm just gonna jump on board these right-wing ideologies and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on kind of, I don't know, maybe the failures of left talking heads or politicians that have actually allowed these other ideas to kind of permeate so easily?
Yeah, I feel like what really makes people believe in these conspiracist ideas often is that they feel like they have no power or influence, or what they do can't matter. And I feel like if they keep voting year after year and they feel like there actually isn't any material progress being made in their own lives, then that's very difficult to reconcile with sort of a positive view of liberal democracy, because it's just not working. You vote, and it just doesn't feel like, even when people that you vote for win, it doesn't feel like there's any sort of meaningful progress being made. And so in order to sort of resolve that cognitive dissonance, you might wind up telling yourself a story that this is because there's just a handful of conspirators who are just very much determined to make the lives of people like me worse. And then in order to avoid falling into despair, then you might wind up believing in something like QAnon, which tells you that, well, you're right. We're going to validate your feelings that things are shit because there are evil, powerful people who are pulling the strings, who aren't really the politicians. We're just sort of making the real shots. But fortunately, I've got good news. All the bad guys you hate are going to get arrested, and also there are people in the military who are going to sweep away all of your political villains, and then people will all the conspiracy theories you believe will be proven true, and the world's eyes will open, and there'll be a great awakening, and all of your friends who called you crazy and stupid will come running and apologizing. That winds up being a very appealing story. If like I said, if you have totally lost any faith in the political system at all as a consequence of there being very little or no meaningful progress in your life.
When I was younger, it seemed that a lot of the lefties were the conspiracy theorists. Think people like George Carlin and Bill Hicks are cutting through the truth, and the fucking government doesn't have your best interests at heart. And it seemed like a lot more kind of lefty talking point to entertain these much more conspiratorial kind of a
lot of it true though.
Totally.
George Carlin, he's nailing it.
At
the time.
Totally. But it's interesting how it has kind of flipped completely on its head, where there's been so much more radicalization around conspiracy theories and mainstreaming of it, which seems to have come so much more from the right wing, that a lot of the lefties now seem to be really almost like simping for the government, like really.
Like liberals, I think,
right,
like would be the definition. Like a lot of like leftists are a lot more, inclined to be critical of, like the Democratic Party, because they're not doing much and they don't play the same game as the Republicans. So progress doesn't really happen. And so people, liberals will come at leftists claiming that, that they're the people, that they're kind of somehow on the side of the Republicans, or, kind of right wing, because they're not just like simping for Biden or whatever. They're, more likely to critique, because, which is what you should do. Like, you can't, even though I would prefer, Biden to be in power, or over here, Anthony Albanese, like the Labor Party, to be in power, it doesn't mean that they're like immune from criticism, because they're not doing a fucking lot, and it's like incredibly frustrating. But that's part of the infighting that happens on the kind of left-wing liberal side of politics.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I don't know if it was kind of as a consequence of the Mueller investigation and feeling like Trump was such a threat. There are lots of Democrats and liberals who all of a sudden just love the FBI. Thought like the was going to sweep up and do all these heroic things against the evil Trump. Of course, I feel like it's like you look at the history of the FBI, they were like infiltrating and breaking up leftist groups and doing lots of horrible things. And like when we talk about the deep state, I mean, J. Edgar Hoover, longtime FBI director, really was the deep state. He was a guy who had more power than a lot of members of Congress and presidents. But so it's very, it is very strange to all of a sudden, for liberals, all of a sudden to love the federal police force and because they believe that Trump was such a threat. There's also this weird belief that, basically, I mean, it's like once you start thinking that the solution to the country's problems involve arresting the politicians you think you've done bad, then basically you've kind of like given up on liberal democratic principles, because you think that, all right, we just need some sort of authoritarian force within the government to like sweep away the bad guys, rather than relying upon the kind of democratic process, because you think that the democratic process has fucked up so badly that you basically need the federal police force to come in and fix it for you. And that's I don't think that's necessarily just a right wing belief anymore. I mean, I'm really worried about this phenomenon of people thinking that they can arrest away the problems of the country. It's like it's just a matter of like locking up the right powerful people. And obviously, I would be very happy to see Trump face some kind of serious consequences. It baffles me that he has reached the ripe old age of 76 with no criminal record. But that's only as a matter of like feeling, there needs to be some kind of justice be done. There needs to be some kind of break in this tradition of like elite immunity that sort of allowed many people to do horrible things because they're powerful and get away with it. But I don't tell myself that like, well, if Trump's arrested, then this will somehow lead to a healing of the country and the serious problems it faces will somehow recede. I honestly think that if Trump is like arrested, this will cause perhaps more strife. But I still think it was a good thing just for broad sort of ideas of like equal justice. But this idea that that serious problems can be solved by arresting the right people, I think is kind of naive.
Yeah, and it just is the same kind of thing that again, going back to the QAnon kind of thing, let's just arrest all of our enemies and everything will just enter this utopian stage of the world or America, and everything will be like swept away and we'll just clean slate it up. But then it's like on the kind of right-wing side of things, it's like if Trump does get arrested, and I see this all the time on Fox, is just like, well, what about Hillary? The emails, It's like the emails, man. Like, come on. It's like it's old shit. Like it's like 7, 8, 9, whatever years ago. And as you said, like with Obama, like what about Obamagate? Like I still don't even know what Obamagate is. But like that's kind of what I see would happen if Trump were to receive some kind of get arrested and get an ankle bracelet or whatever. Which is, as you say, not ideal.
No, it's not. But no, I think one of the things that people might have a good case is like, why exactly are they busting Trump over this petty like campaign finance, paying off a porn star with hush money kind of thing? Whereas that we're George W. Bush, a man who misled the country into a war that led to the deaths of 1 million Iraqis and caused again further horrible strife in the Middle East. He has no threat of being arrested, even though that action is obviously much worse than the action that Trump is being indicted for. Well, at least that we know of so far. The indictment has been unsealed. I don't know. Maybe he killed 1,000,001 Iraqis, and that'll be discovered in the sealed indictment for Trump. But,
do you remember George Bush doing that Freudian slip when he was kind of addressing, I don't know, a big room of people talking about how Ukraine has been unjustly invaded, and he accidentally said Iraq instead of Ukraine?
Yes. Yeah, my God. That was absurd. That was like
that was amazing.
It was a weird, funny thing. I felt like I remember the crowd caught it too. They had this nervous chuckle go throughout the crowd.
Yeah.
But
that was amazing. You're totally right. Like Bush and Cheney, like absolutely. I think
Henry Kissinger, man, is still alive, still unjudged.
Exactly. Horrible. But he's still invited to weird think tanks and stuff, and people listen to like Kissinger. Just you're right. Is absolutely absurd. But like I said, with there in like the U.S., there's been this tradition of like elite immunity. Once you get to a certain level of power, then there's this sort of like feeling. I feel like the justice system wasn't really willing to go after you because it would appear to be political. Because unless you perfectly balance the political indictments, then it would feel like you're doing politics through law enforcement. And so I think they were generally reluctant to do that, even though Obama was like, wasn't willing to talk about whether or not W. Bush should face serious consequences for Iraq or anything like that. There's a sense of just moving on, or like even going back to like Watergate. He was pardoned. For Watergate, because there is a sense of, well, no, we need to move on. Ford said we need to move on from this and just go to the next phase. And this idea that there's like once you get to that point, it's not, there's no real precedent for you suffering for any consequences for anything you do. But Trump is such a uniquely unpleasant person to generally that I felt like he was managed to break that tradition of elite immunity.
Yeah, and I think he has done so many things blatantly that it does get to the point where it's kind of a little bit ridiculous that, the Georgia thing, the top secret documents, but then, people say that, well, Biden had documents too, and Obama had some in a bowling alley and fucking rah. And he has just pissed off so many people. And I mean, there may be some political elements to it. Like, I think if he got back in, it would just be a revenge fest for 4 years, and he would do crazy shit, like bomb Mexico was a recent thing he was talking about. Like,
when he gets back in, by the way, when he gets back.
And you can actually like run from jail. I don't think he's going to get put in jail, but there is like a precedent for that.
All right.
But I see people, Travis, like calling for Biden to pardon Trump. That would unite the country if he did that. I don't fucking think it would.
One rule for the rich and powerful, another for the rest of us. Yeah.
Hey, Ghislaine Maxwell got 10 years? Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would further reinforce this idea that it really is a big club and you're just not in it, which is like I think a Carlin quote. But yeah, I don't really see that happening. I don't see Biden doing that.
Yeah. Hey, Travis, just a couple of funny things I wanted to bring up with you. You're abused by Jim Watkins at one of these rallies, weren't you? Yeah.
I sure was. Yeah, I went to a Trump rally in Arizona, and I happened to see Ron and Jim Watkins there. And when when I introduced myself, he started swearing at me and threatened to punch me in the face. And he called me a shit ass. So
Shit ass.
yeah.
Burn, bro.
It's such a boomer insult.
But it's funny. It's like apparently he thought I was someone, or he thought I was doing something I wasn't doing, like doxing his family or threatening him or something like that. So then when he was informed that I don't do any of that bullshit, he sent me a apology video, which was I appreciated.
Yeah,
that's quite sweet.
Yeah, is that the only interaction you've had with Jim over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I have not communicated with him privately.
Right.
So so far, my only interaction with him was that one time when he sort of cussed me out. He sent me that apology video, and then then afterwards I met up with him again, and I shook his hand, and he apologized again. So that day in Arizona was the total of all my interactions with Jim Watkins so far.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I had him on this podcast a while ago, which was a very unusual experience. And he ended up sending me his book, his book that he authored, signed, saying, what did he say? He's like something about the state of Australia has fallen and stay strong, and
we have fallen. Did he get any honey?
I didn't get any acorn honey, no.
Bummer.
But
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, they sell I think they call it like honey pot honey, and it's based on a joke that they ate because it's such an extremist gathering place of some kind of federal honey pot. Yeah.
Well, it's quite creative. So I just wanted to bring up Marjorie Taylor Greene, because as I understand it, you've had an interesting interaction with her about the blocking on Twitter.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene, I've been following her since like mid 2020, when she was just a primary candidate in her district in Georgia, because I was like, oh man, here's a QAnon follower who actually maybe has a shot at getting into office. And then I watched her. I followed the night of her primary live, and then she won the primary. I was like, oh, she's going to win. It's such a heavily Republican district. She's going to be a one-time QAnon promoter who's going to be elected into office. And I just tweeted about it. And then one day she wound up blocking me. This was before she was sworn in. Well, after she was sworn in, I realized that like it's not, it's a violation of the First Amendment. So we've learned for a government official who uses their government platform to block you on that platform. So the law basically says, and this law was tested a couple times. It was used against Trump. It was also used against AOC, a congresswoman, and yeah, so the law basically says that, like, so if someone uses their account for like personal reasons, even if they're a government official, they don't have to block you. But if there are any kind of like government communications on that platform, even if it's a personal account, then you can't block anyone, because it's like preventing citizens apparently from accessing your sort of like government kind of announcements. So what wound up happening is that I got in touch with a lawyer based in Seattle who wrote up a very threatening letter, who said that if Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't unblock me by February 1st, 2020, that I would be forced to vindicate my rights in court. And unfortunately, it didn't come to that. She wound up unblocking me. So yeah, that was a fun experience. That was, I call it my brief but fruitful civil rights battle.
Oh, it's brilliant. I loved it. Like, I remember hearing about you talking about it on the podcast, and I just thought it was incredible.
It is
Good
incredible.
work.
It's something she would do as well, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Mrs. Free Speech.
Totally. She's just badgering people constantly. Like when she was like out the front of AOC's door, like yelling through her like letterbox and stuff. Oh, she's a stain, isn't
and
she?
she's sitting in the head of the House chair, like running committees and shit. It's fucking wild.
Oh my God, imagine if she was VP, Trump's
she
VP.
might be.
I know. Imagine that. Like, kind of what a success story.
I'd love that.
I mean,
That would be nuts.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised because, it's like I think that like the after seeing how Trump treated Mike Pence, sending essentially a mob who wound up, chanting, kill Mike Pence, and then setting up gallows. I mean, he set a mob who seemed very willing to rip him apart. You got to ask, what kind of person would be Trump's VP after seeing how Pence was treated? I think Marjorie Taylor Greene might be up to the task. Because,
absolutely.
Pence is still defending him. He said it's outrageous that he got indicted. I'm like, dude, you have no spine. You've got no backbone, man.
A bit bad for him. He's just like
a shell of a man.
Yeah. I mean, he wants to be pres. But
yeah, good luck.
I was gonna and just one more thing, Travis. I wanted to. People listening will probably have no idea about this, but you use a stock photo image as your profile picture on Twitter. And
yes, I do.
Of the Ukrainian man who watched Q Into the Storm and noticed you. And could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's really quite a sweet story.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. Is that I formed my account all the way back in the early 2017. I just made it sort of like a shit posting account. I kind of used to blow off steam when I was and I just wanted to be in a non-account. Like many people make a non-account, so I didn't think too much of it. So I made up this name, and then I tried to figure out an avatar. And what I did was I went to Shutterstock, which is a stock photo kind of like repository. I searched for the word confused, and I viewed through like the various headshots that came up with that keyword. And then I noticed one of a man in a white t-shirt and a beard leaning forward with his slack-jawed expression. I thought that was very funny. And I felt like it matched how I felt reading the news a lot. Just shocked and bewildered and confused at the state of the world. And so I downloaded this headshot and sort of uploaded it to my Twitter, thinking nothing of it. And then what wound up happening is that so I got involved, started talking about QAnon, got involved with QAnon Anonymous, raised my profile, started getting published in a few places, and then I did find out that through the agency that who took this stock photo, that it was a Ukrainian man. That's the only thing I knew about him. So all right, so some guy in Ukraine, some stock photo model is now my AVI, whatever. I didn't think of it. But then I got then I was featured in the docuseries Q Into the Storm. And what happened is that the man who in that photo watched it in Ukraine, and through a friend of his hit me up. And I found out that his name is Alexander, and he's actually a really funny comedian who once performed for like a pretty popular comedy show there in Ukraine. And and then I wound up having him on the show. We did an episode with him, and where he's kind of like talked about his experiences. We did a funny Jake story. Jake is another one of my co-hosts with him, and now he so he has a little bit of a platform, and he has a Twitter account now. And this is the funny part. He now uses my headshot as his Twitter AVI. So yeah, it's a funny experience.
I just thought that was absolutely brilliant, because it's just I just absolutely love that story, and following his Twitter account, during the war has been it's been sad, interesting, touching. It's kind of cool to see how a lot of the QAnon Anonymous audience has, and you guys, have kind of been donating to his Patreon. Like I donate to it, and how that quite literally translates to, you know, things that they need over there, you know, fighting this war. It's, you know, I just thought it was such an interesting story, and, you know, the way that it evolved. And I love every time I see his account, seeing like your photo up there. I just think it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I think so. Like, yeah, he seems like a really good guy. Like he said, like we met him and interviewed him before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and yeah, he is obviously like all fighting age men in that country. He's a really tough spot, but he's been yeah, making the most of it, trying to help his neighbors get through a really rough time.
Awesome. Travis, man, thank you so much for making the time and coming on and talking with us. As I said before, QAnon Anonymous, one of my absolute favorite podcasts, constantly on rotation. I encourage everyone who may not have listened to give it a go. Yeah, just like, I don't know how you guys do such a thorough job of just researching all these incredibly weird fringe things, not just about QAnon, but just, you know, all over the place. Just these really bizarre kind of culty, grifty people and weird conspiratorial phenomenons that I don't know, that weirdly shape our world increasingly more and more shape our world, right?
Yeah. It's been really fun. I mean, I've always had interest in like fringe communities, so it's really rewarding to, like, learn more and more about them each week and see how they influence mainstream politics, and get to share what I learn on the podcast every week.
Yeah, awesome.
Yes, thanks heaps for coming on, Travis. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you, mate, and thank you, Owen. Appreciate it. Awesome. Cool. Take care, everyone.
Take care, Travis. Chat to you soon, mate.
Bye.